Now let us have some kind of question answer before we start. So the first question is, why Greek period? Can somebody heard about Greek period from the audience? Anybody knows what is importance of this Greek period, and what are names that you can think of from this Greek civilization or Greek Renaissance, whatever you call it as, Greek way of thinking, Greek philosophy, Greek mathematics, whatever. Some names. Can you tell something about this civilization? Anybody? Yes? Mandar, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, Aristotle, Plato, I know these names.
Aristotle and Plato. Okay. Okay. So somebody gave some names, Aristotle and Plato. See, the reason behind choosing this topic, that is Greek period, is that it is one of the first well documented history of knowledge. Okay. So the documentation part is important when we think of Greek period. See, even earlier periods, you will find some written evidence, but most of the times it was oral tradition. Whereas in Greek period, you will find some oral tradition, but something very concrete which you can even read today. For example, Euclid's books are available in printed format today. Or forming institutes. Forming, now we know Tata Institute. So it's an institute for doing research. Institute for Advanced Study. Last Saturday we talked about. So forming these institutes started in Greek period. Now, in our Indian civilization, there used to be, you can say that you go to Guru's house and stay there. And you might term that as institute, but that was his home. So there was nothing like lectures, periods, timetable. It was Guru's home, and disciples will go there. They will do this household work also in that house, and then further they will learn from Guru. But in Greek period, as we will see now, formal institutes were established, and therefore there was documented evidence of research, very high quality research, very high quality research. Therefore, whenever we dig up the origin of knowledge, many people give more credit to Greek because they can easily give the evidence. Now this Indian origin mathematics also, people have started finding evidence, but that becomes very difficult. Okay. Whereas Greek evidences are very visible and clear. Therefore, Greek period is important for at least tracing back history up to that period. In this Greek period, we have Greek geometry. Now, some names, which names you told? Aristotle, right? But the title itself suggests Pythagoras and Euclid. Okay. And now I have added Plato to it. So Plato, Pythagoras, and Euclid, when we think of geometry, so Greek studied geometry very extensively, very extensively, and very pioneering work they did. We are going to see just a glimpse, but there are volumes written on Greek geometry, Greek mathematics, even Greek number theory, and only few things we are going to see in this lecture, and main themes. So Pythagorean triples, that idea came from Pythagorean school. Prime numbers were studied. Last lecture I gave you proof of the fact that number of primes is infinite, and that proof was given by Euclid. So number theory was studied extensively. And this person Diophantus also studied number theory and algebra very extensively in the Greek period. There were some problems in Greek mathematics. For example, the notion of infinity was problematic. See, we are talking about period 2500 years back or even more than that. They could see infinity. Now today's mathematics is full of infinity. I mean, it is around infinity. Okay, even in fifth or sixth standard, students study natural number set, integer set, rational numbers, real numbers also. They are introduced. They keep learning real number system till their post graduation. Sometimes they clear their MSc exam also without understanding what is real line. That is all right. That is fine. But this concept of infinity is right there. The concept of limit, concept of differentiation, integration are part of daily routine now. It's a daily workout. But all these notions around infinity were extremely new in Greek period. They saw that, but they could not interpret. And there was some fear for these concepts. And everything in mathematics, they used to relate it to our day-to-day lives or existence of God or religion or existence of this earth and things like that, philosophical matters. So interpreting infinity was a little difficult for Greek people and related to our day-to-day visible matters. Okay. And Aristotle name was taken. The other important name is Archimedes. Okay, so this is roughly the Greek. This is outline of the lecture. Of course, Archimedes and Aristotle, I may not be able to give time for that. As I told you, the characteristic feature of the Greek school is well-documented evidence of high-quality scientific work. You think about Pythagoras, or you think about Euclid, or think about Plato. One can give names of the books or work that you take about Diophantus, Aristotle, Archimedes. See, Aristotle, Archimedes came much later, but even Euclid, the work is very visible, and there that is in the written format and institutionalized. Okay. Now, the historic background of this period is towards east of Greek, there was some civilization called Egyptian civilization, which was further more ancient, perhaps. Around Nile River, there was a civilization. It was a very fertile land. And in fact, origin of the geometry can be traced in Egypt. And towards further east, this Indian civilization did exist. And there was also Arabian civilization. So towards east of Greece, there are already quest for knowledge. There were scholar people who already did some work, and motivation came from east. See, nowadays entire motivation comes from west, and people also want to go to west to get the knowledge. Okay, one wants to get admission in Harvard, Princeton, MIT, Yale, Stanford, or go to Germany, LMU, and institutes like that, Oxford, Cambridge in UK. But these are days when knowledge was stressed towards east. There was nothing much towards the west of the Greece. See, Western knowledge mainly evolved in the Renaissance period. That is mostly after 14th century, 15th century. And from Greek, it went to Italy. So you can trace Italian people like Fibonacci I talked about last time. That is 13th century. And then slowly after Renaissance, but there was explosion of knowledge after that. So you will see the importance of this historical background or the eastern part of Greece when we will talk on Pythagoras. This other point that I told you, that establishment of academic institutes was major contribution of the Greek period. That is, I will tell at least two institutes which are very famous, which are formed in the Greek period. Then novel approach of teaching learning methods in science. See, Greeks found new approach of learning. And as many of you know, this Socratic method of dialogue, that is question answer. Okay, that was opened up by Greek people. In fact, it is idea of Socrates. Okay. See, now I am asking you a question and you are not answering. So Greeks always believed that that's not good way of either teaching or learning. It should be always in the dialogue method. Teacher will ask questions. Disciples, as they call, or students will answer the questions. Then students will ask the questions and guru or teacher at that time will answer the query and the dialogue will continue. And through the dialogue, knowledge will flow. So this was a very novel approach, and this can be also traced to Indian tradition, Guru Shishya Parampara. But we cannot trace two-way traffic much. Most of the Guru Shishya Parampara is Guru offering knowledge to students, whereas it was rule in Greek period that ask questions. Dialogue was very important. We will see later that people wrote dialogues also. Okay. Then the glorious tradition of about 1000 years devoted to fundamental research. This Greek period continued up to dark period, that is roughly starting from 600 BCE to 600 CE, that is about 1000 years. And galaxy of scholars, scientists, philosophers, poets, architects, musicians. So this was also about explosion of knowledge. People were behind getting something new. They were curious about so many things. They wanted to know. They wanted to learn. That was a knowledge-oriented society. And therefore, knowledge in many branches flourished in this period. Main of these two branches are philosophy and science, which includes mathematics, but also literature, architects. Veritonius, last time I showed you proportion in body, that architect is from originally Greece. Now some of the names of this entire Greek school: Thales, Socrates, Plato, Pythagoras, Euclid, Archimedes, Aristotle, just to name very, very famous. I am going to tell you some names which are not that famous towards the end of the lecture. Now let's talk about the early Greek scholar, perhaps the very, very first kind of Greek scholar, Thales. So Thales lived in Miletus on the Ionian mainland. So now that part is called Turkey. Okay, all of you must be aware of Turkey. Istanbul is the capital. So that part was called Ionian mainland, and Miletus is towards the west of that, and Thales lived, see, 623 BC. So we are tracing back the history from that period. Okay, 623. He was first philosopher in the Greek tradition. Okay. So Thales is supposed to be originator of this kind of Greek school, and many scholars took motivation from Thales. And one of the great scholars which took motivation from Thales was, of course, Pythagoras, as you will see. Thales was first to conceive that earth is made up of a single element. See, he was walking through hills in Greece and he found something very unusual, some unusual element. See, the questions at that time were like this. Questions at that time were very primitive. How earth is made up of, how stars, they used to look at stars. See, astronomy was always the major concern for all the ancient scientists, ancient philosophers, including Indians. Their main motivation was to understand how this world is made up of, how we are here. So questions were philosophical. What is this earth made up of? So Thales conceived that there must be some single element out of which this earth is made up of. He is the originator of the deductive method. So what is deductive method? Deductive method is that this laws of syllogism which later came through the work of Aristotle, that is A implies B, B implies C, then A implies C, and then if the sentence is made up of and or, so he formalized it. But Thales was the first to thought that just ad hoc way of saying as a thumb rule that something is rule. Okay, so something is just a rule. So earlier people used to say, our teacher will say that this is the rule. Thales said that it has to be a deductive method, in the sense that, just 1 minute. Hello, ito ordu naka, please. Hello. Originator of the deductive method means there is some sentence which is already supposed to be true, and then there is some law of logic. From the earlier statement, you go to the next statement and reach the conclusion. That is deductive method. Thales geometry theorem I am quoting here. The base angles of an isosceles triangle are equal. Now this we learn in 5th or 6th standard, and the credit is not given to Thales. In some books it is written that in school books it should be written as Thales theorem, so that students will wonder who was this person. Of course that is not true. Students don't ask questions. I will tell you later. The angles between two intersecting straight lines are equal. The opposite angles are equal. So these theorems were derived by Thales at that time. Of course, lines were undefined for all the Greek people. They never defined the term line and point. Okay? So I'm quoting some Thales theorems. Two triangles are congruent if they have two angles and the included side equal. So ASA, as we call it, that as school theorem of the congruence of triangles. An angle in the semicircle is a right angle. Now I suggest all of you to take a note of these theorems. I have quoted 4 theorems of Thales, and I suggest you to provide proofs of this. See, we always thought of taking this audience right into mathematics after a few days. So I believe that some of you will be able to prove these theorems, which are of course at school level, and I'm sure you will be able to do that. Then the most influential mathematician after Thales. So I'm writing these people in the order they lived. So the person that appeared in the title of the lecture, because I want to talk more on Pythagoras, and some of you also have heard about him. Can somebody tell me something about Pythagoras? Mandar, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Shall I say something?
Let others try.
Yeah.
Tell me something about Pythagoras. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Are people there in
I
the
don't
lecture?
think, yeah, apart from Pythagoras theorem, I don't think people know anything more. I mean, obviously, everyone knows that right angle Pythagoras theorem. But apart
Okay.
from that,
Okay. Okay.
I
Good.
think
Good.
nobody knows.
Who is talking?
Abhijit.
Abhijit.
Sir,
Abhijit.
Abhijit, yes.
Abhijit, good that you talk something. I first of all appreciate that. I mean, anything, you are free to talk. First of all, please talk in the class. Anything that you want. Like you told that we don't know anything besides Pythagoras theorem. But forget about what you said. You said something is important to me. All right. Mandar, you wanted to tell something?
No, I was just talking about the same thing that maybe people must be at least knowing that that typical Pythagoras theorem we used to do in school about right angle triangle.
Okay.
And maybe one more thing, like they have a kind of cult and um, whatever things they used to do, they used to keep it as kind of a secret.
Mhm.
That's what I have heard. So I would like to know something more about this.
Okay. See, point that I want to make here by
Some
asking,
are put in the chat box, I think.
huh?
Some of them have put it in the chat box, I think.
Okay, I will check. I have to go to that side for checking chat box. Okay, due to heavy rain, I can't hear. Dhanashri, that is fine. Okay, fine. Okay, why I am asking question? There is a reason behind it. Why I am asking question about Pythagoras? There is a reason. Now the reason is that we all heard Pythagoras name right in our school days through Pythagoras theorem. It's famous theorem. My point is, our education system is never, never allowed us to ask more questions, and it never promoted curiosity. Because suppose if you heard some new name and some great theorem, then actually we should have, I'm including myself, we should have asked immediately our teacher or our family, whatever, that who was this Pythagoras? We heard his name today in school and we learned his theorem, but we don't know anything about Pythagoras. Then go to some school library, or your parents may give you some books about Pythagoras, and then you kind of fulfill your curiosity. This thing doesn't happen. It comes and goes. Pythagoras theorem comes and goes, and we say that we don't know much about Pythagoras. I am always saying we. I mean, I'm included in the same kind of system. And let me tell you that my TYBSc special students who took mathematics as their special subject, when it was asked to them that when did Pythagoras live, roughly can you tell the period? Then the period varied about 1500 years. Somebody said 200 BC, somebody said 800 AD, somebody said 16th century. Now a single one person, his lifespan, how can it happen? I mean, such a varied. But then we never dig up history. We never ask questions. Something new, if we hear, we are not curious. So that's therefore this question answer I took here. That do we know anything more? Okay. Born around 570 BC on the island of Samos, and Samos was very close to Miletus. Miletus is the city where Thales lived. Thales spent his life in Miletus. Thales acquired a lot of fame as a philosopher and mathematician. I gave some theorems, very basic geometry theorems, though we feel that they are very simple. We are talking about so many years back. And on this background, Pythagoras was born. close to Miletus, towards western side of Miletus, obviously influenced by Thales, and definitely he made Thales in his young days. Pythagoras family was a business family, it is said. See, this is all very speculative gray history where people have made guesses and not definitive answers to their life. Their mathematics is known, but life is sort of somewhat in gray area. But definitely he made Thales, and Thales suggested him to go to travel to east. That's what I was telling you. Thales told him that if you want to acquire more knowledge, then go to east. Go to Egypt. Go to Arabian mainland. Go to India, like that. Of course, there is no clear-cut evidence that Pythagoras visited India, but he came very close to Indian continent. And after this travel, so in Pythagoras' life, this travel was very important. This travel gave him wisdom. This travel through sea, he thought of many problems. Problems of measurement, problems in geometry, problems about numbers. This number thing I am going to come, and that is very important in Pythagoras' life. And he talked to several scholars in East, and came back in Greek and settled in Croton. See, there are reasons which I am not going into details here, that why he didn't go to Athens. There, the situation was not politically good at that time, but it will take a lot of detour if I go into that. So he preferred to stay in Croton and founded a school there. Remember, this is important. He founded a school there. So around Pythagoras, like-minded people came, and Pythagoras, due to his wisdom, knowledge, could attract many people. And a school was formed. Okay, this is called Pythagorean school, and Mandar talked about sect or something like that. This school became a sect. See, Pythagoras is also a mystic, apart from a mathematician. And the reason is they founded a sect, or called brotherhood, bound by a pledge of loyalty. This is a very mystic school, Pythagorean school. And Pythagoras and his followers later on, they used to give pledge of loyalty that nothing will go out of this school. The knowledge that you gather here is very secret, to the extent that, see, this Pythagorean maintained very, very high level of secrecy. See, that is also one disadvantage now, looking back, that due to this secrecy, something must have been missed, because they followed oral tradition, and plus it remained within that sect. They did not allow anyone to talk about that also. It was a very, very strict mystic school. Okay. Okay, let's go. The first major discovery was in acoustics. So we all know Pythagoras theorem, and you said that you wanted to know more. So vibration of strings. So Pythagoras, again, all these discoveries were through their personal experiences. So it is told that Pythagoras was walking through streets and he heard the resonance of sound in a blacksmith shop. So he stood there for some time, and then he thought of these laws of vibrating string. So he worked on that and then found numerical relationships between length of the string and the resonance that come out of it, the harmony of that string. If you vibrate that string, what frequency will come out? And as all of you know, it is inversely proportional. It is inversely proportional to the string. So the pitch of the sound of a vibrating string is inversely proportional to the length. So this was kind of first law in mathematical physics. So some mathematical relationship implying a physical phenomena that you can actually find in experiment. See, now we have several laws, and in laboratory we verify those laws. Several Newton's laws, including all laws in optics, Newton's law of cooling, many laws. Simple pendulum, things like that. But Pythagoras at that time, 500 years BC, wrote a mathematical relationship. And if you remember Pradeep Apte's lecture in this series, he gave these all proportions that 2 times the original frequency is 1 octave. The lower sa and upper sa, that is exactly double the frequency. Okay. So that directly depends on the length of the string. And then 3:2, 5:3, like this, all those frequencies of ma, pa, all those famous Indian, but even the Western chords. So basic law is the law of vibrating strings. And that was discovered long back by Pythagoras. And therefore, remember, music was also very important to Pythagoreans. See, this sect was famous as Pythagoreans. The people who lived with Pythagoras followed all the rules, very mystic, secret, and strict rules. They are called Pythagoreans. Now see, this is very important statement that you are looking at. If you think of Greek science, numerical ratios govern musical harmony. And Pythagoras and all the Pythagoreans, they, from this point onwards, started strongly believing that numbers are important. Whatever you see around the world, whatever you see, everything is nothing but some number relation. So the world is created by numbers. So this was motto of the Pythagorean school. Pythagoras always, and all the Pythagoreans, so many years after that, they always believed that only important thing is in this world are numbers. Numbers rule the universe. That was their motto. Numbers rule the universe. See, this is some kind of mysticism, or this is some kind of, people, it is difficult to believe that everything is made up of numbers. But this is what Pythagoreans always believe, that everything, any phenomena you give, ultimately it will come down to numbers. Now, Pythagoreans studied numbers as spiritual quest. So to one, they give something like God or some attribute they gave, and tried to describe every phenomena. For example, 2 they used to call male and female, 3 something, 4, every number, and therefore they studied the properties of numbers. So in the process, they studied number theory. See, for example, 5, they always believed this, something that we call as Pancha Mahabhuta, that fire, water, air, like 5 elements, and world is made up of that. So 5 was very important number for Pythagoreans. So their school, their emblem was the pentagram. If you remember, I showed you last time when I described golden ratio. That was pentagram was the emblem of the Pythagorean school. See, 6 also they studied because 6 is a perfect number. See, properties of the perfect numbers were derived by Pythagoreans. But their objective was study 6 and attach some world element to 6 so that it will match. The algebraic relations among numbers led Pythagoreans to Pythagorean triples. Now, I would have told more about Pythagorean triples, but I'm not sure whether I will get time. If I get time towards end, which I never get, I will come back to this. But typical example is 3, 4, 5. Why? Because 3 square plus 4 square equal to 5 square. And what is great about that? So these triple, the numbers satisfy Pythagoras theorem. Not only that, these numbers are positive integers. So a triple of positive integers ABC is called Pythagorean triple if a square plus b square equal to c square. Okay. Now let us come back to the theorem that is known for, Pythagoras theorem. We all learn Pythagoras theorem is a mathematics statement, but I always tell my student that it is part of the culture. If you walk through streets and stop somebody, unknown person in your city, do this experiment for yourself and ask, tell me any one statement in mathematics. Tell me one statement in mathematics. Randomly you stop anyone, some maybe adult person, then most probably, high probability, he will at least say Pythagoras theorem. Whether the further statement is correct, wrong, that is okay. But Pythagoras theorem is most well heard of. Everyone at least knows that there is something called Pythagoras theorem. Am I right? What is your opinion?
Yes, that's true.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, now you please do this experiment in your society. You ask some layman. Layman means somebody in society who is not mathematics person or something, some housewife, something. You ask, tell me mathematics statement. I have recently completed a course. You tell me. Then note the frequencies of Pythagoras theorem. That will be interesting. Okay. So it is one of the greatest theorems of all times. From this perspective as well as from mathematics perspective. So much of mathematics is developed through this theorem. Great amount of pure mathematics has been developed in many directions. Some of my students are sitting here. They learn some advanced mathematics from me actually, but they know that in functional analysis, also in Hilbert spaces, they have learned Pythagoras theorem in Hilbert spaces. Mandar, am I right?
Sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So the Pythagoras theorem appears and it will continue to appear. See, in this era of computer science, we keep saying that things become obsolete. But if people decide not to use Pythagoras theorem and proceed, because if somebody says that, oh, it is 2500 years old and so on, so I will do only those things which avoid Pythagoras theorem, then you can't proceed. Even today's life, your architecture will fail, your so many applications will fail, the basic plane geometry will fail miserably. So it is tremendous amount of power hidden in such a simple quadratic formula. So this theorem started beginning of a new era of deductive reasoning rather than a thumb rule. That's what I told you. Pythagoras and Pythagoreans provided proofs of this theorem. They just did not state that. It is also said that they used this statement for the purpose of some religious rituals which they wanted to carry out, some bricks they wanted to arrange and things like that. But anyhow, through the quest of numbers also they studied this Pythagoras theorem. Actually, Pythagorean triples they observed first and then the geometric relation came up. Well, Euclid in his geometry book wrote two proofs. If time permits, I am going to tell you one proof of Pythagoras theorem again today. Last time I gave you proof which was given by American president. If you remember, do you remember?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember the proof also? Not perhaps, because there is some long pause here. It's okay. I gave you one proof which used area of trapezium.
Yes.
And today I propose to give another proof which is actually written in Euclid's books, but that only if time permits. Oh, Mandar, it's not going. I mean, I cannot. Okay. So this famous theorem has record number of 400 proofs. So I have not heard at least a theorem in mathematics which has got 400 proofs, 400 different proofs. record number of proofs of this theorem. See, this is also a very important observation, that the theorem led to the construction of square root of 2. Because if you take one side 1, other side 1, then the diagonal is square root of 2. But square root of 2 did not exist at that time. I mean, that irrational numbers were not studied. Irrational numbers were rigorously studied in 19th century, 18th, 19th century, much after Greek period. So Greeks were afraid. Greeks were afraid of this construction, in fact. They did that, but then they thought that this diagonal, this hypotenuse of the triangle with sides 1, 1 is something mysterious. We cannot measure that. So it went to such an extent that they said that hypotenuse is lengthless. Hypotenuse has no length. So if you take a right angle triangle with sides 1, 1, hypotenuse has no length. So Pythagoreans were shaken by the discovery of this number. As I told you, there was fear for infinity, and root 2 is anyway a number which you cannot express unless you use the concept of infinity. Otherwise, you just say it is root 2. But what is that? If you really want to understand more, then you need some concept of infinity anyways. So Pythagoreans refused to accept its existence of the square root of 2. They tried to keep the discovery as a closely guarded secret. Remember, this root 2 they found, but there was oath of loyalty. So of course it did not go outside the sect, and they kept it more secret, closely guarded, because they had fear that something not good has come out of their research in a way. To the extent that one of the Pythagoreans, Hippasus was a Pythagorean, and knowingly or unknowingly he told outside sect somebody about root 2. He talked about square root of 2, that we are getting this hypotenuse of length like this, like not root 2. Root 2 now I am uttering. They must have thought that some number they are getting, something like this. Then can you imagine what must have happened to Hippasus? He told the discovery of this number outside the sect. Then what must have happened? He was murdered. He was brutally killed by Pythagoreans. So much of secrecy was there, and this root 2 they were very afraid of. The influence of the theorem, however, lasted for more than 2000 years. Now I told you why 2000 years it is going to be endless. I mean, world will always live with Pythagoras theorem. We may die, okay? Even after 3000 years from here, I doubt whether we can live without Pythagoras theorem, because it's such a basic rule. So some quote is definitely worth it. No other proposition of geometry has exerted so much influence on so many branches of mathematics as has the simple quadratic formula known as Pythagoras theorem. Indeed, much of the history, this B is typo, much of the history of classical mathematics could be written around that proposition. So if you can write nice books around this proposition. So you say that your theme is Pythagoras theorem, but then you can extend so many things around that. You can extend it to 3 dimension, you can extend it to function analysis, you can think of some perpendicularity, other relation, some other inner product you may take. You may go into several directions. You may think of Pythagorean triples, you may get into number theory, so many things. So a lot of history. For example, you can think of the rational points on the circle, I will say, or for example, any conic, typical area of algebraic geometry, finding right. So all the roots can be traced in Pythagoras theorems. There are several poems on Pythagoras theorem. This is one of them. There are hundreds of them. Truth lasts throughout eternity. When once the stupid world, it's like discerns, the theorem coupled with Pythagoras' name holds true today, as it did in olden times. It will continue to flourish. Okay, one can talk more on Pythagoras, but let's complete as much as what we can, what I have decided. So next is Plato, born in Athens. Now we are coming to Athens, remember. Athens is capital of Greece now and a big city at that time, even capital at that time. So Plato was Athens scholar. Plato is known as a founder of the Western philosophy. He is more known as philosopher than mathematician. Of course, he was a mathematician, but he was known as more as a mathematics teacher than and a great philosopher. Okay, the reflection of the reality you can think of as the world and so on. So Plato had influences of Socrates and Pythagoras. Have you heard about Plato and something Platonic? Anybody? Platonic. Platonic something. Has anybody heard?
Platonic solids.
Who is talking? Abhijit?
Platonic solids.
Who is talking?
Nivedita.
Nivedita. There is also something Platonic. Not mathematical, but there is something very known concept as Platonic love. Okay.
Love.
Platonic love and Platonic solid have, I mean, these are two have adjective Platonic. Platonic love is a philosophical notion. I need not go into that. Platonic solids, definitely I will get into that. Wrote dialogues. I was telling you that something dialogue. So Plato actually wrote dialogues. That means he created situations where somebody is saying something, next somebody is answering something. So he wrote dialogues. See, if you try to write a script, you have to write dialogue. So Plato actually write dialogues in philosophy and mathematics. And his famous work is called Republic. In several volumes, this work is there. But the written evidence of the work in this work, Republic. Look at this again. He's founded an institute, and the name of the institute was Academy. So see, the institutes were formed in Greek period. That was very important. This is second institute that we are looking at. So this was Plato's institute, Academy. Outside this institute, he wrote a board, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter my doors." See, the main contribution of Greeks as far as mathematics is concerned is that they understood importance of mathematics. See, at that time, more weightage was towards astronomy, philosophical questions, why we are here, what about our existence of God, how this world is made up of, what is this galaxy. But the Greeks always related all these things to mathematics, and they said that if you want to know, if you want to answer questions in your life about anything that you are curious about, then you have to know few basic mathematics things like geometry, number theory, and things like that. So they always related mathematics to their existence as a very basic tool for living. That is contribution of Greeks. So therefore, see the motto of Plato: "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter my doors." If you don't know geometry, don't come to me. Yeah, these are Platonic solids. Tetrahedron, cube. Tetrahedron has 4 sides, 4 faces. Cube has 6 faces. Octahedron has 8 faces. Dodecahedron has 12 faces, and icosahedron has 20 faces. I wish I could have shown you the Platonic solids, and Plato related these solids to respectively. I have written respectively. Tetrahedron to fire. There are reasons for these relations. Cube to earth, octahedron to air, dodecahedron to ether, and icosahedron to water. Okay. See this. This is cube. Can you see cube, Mandar? Mandar?
Yes.
Can you see?
Yes, sir.
This is cube. And see, this is Platonic picture. The corresponding air or whatever is shown in the cube. This is dodecahedron, I suppose. Tetrahedron. Oh, this is tetrahedron. Huh? This is tetrahedron. It's octahedron. Icosahedron. Okay. Let's go back. So I could show you platonic solids with their whatever fire, earth, and they always believed, as I told you, that this world is made up of mathematical objects, either numbers. Plato said that this tetrahedron represents these matters, and the world is made up of that. Much later, Euler's period, 18th century, this Euler's theorem came up that V plus F equal to E plus 2. That is number of vertices plus number of faces is equal to number of edges plus 2. You can verify this very easily in tetrahedron and cube. Tetrahedron has 4 faces, so F equal to 4. 4 vertices, so V equal to 4. So V plus 4 is equal to 8. And it has how many edges? Am I right here? 6 edges? Yes, 3 plus 3. 6 edges. Cube also has got how many faces? Mandar? 6 faces, correct?
Yes.
8 vertices.
Yeah.
So 8 plus 6 is 14.
Yeah.
And 12 edges.
12 edges.
Yeah. Correct.
So 12 plus 2, 14. Equation is satisfied.
Yeah.
So this is very famous Euler's theorem. And there are only 5 platonic solids which satisfy this. So a regular solid satisfying this relation, then you get only these solids. So only regular solids satisfying this is this. So these platonic solids are very important in geometry, plane geometry, 3-dimensional geometry, solid geometry. Okay, let's come to Euclid. We have already talked about Euclid a lot when I gave lecture on historical developments. Euclid is one of my famous, very favorite mathematicians. I have talked about Euclid in several lectures. I have written an article on Euclid. I really admire the greatness of Euclid, and there are reasons. Okay, there is some history behind it. Alexander the Great, who lived in this period, all of you must have heard about Alexander the Great, and he expanded the Greek Empire. Almost entire world he captured almost entire world. And after doing that, he developed a modern city and named it after himself only, Alexandria. After premature death of Alexander, Ptolemy I chose Alexandria as the capital of the Greece and invited Euclid to develop Mathematics Institute. So that's why I gave this historical reference, that this Alexander the Great died very early at the age of 33. And then this Ptolemy took over, and after a few years after that, and then Euclid was a known great mathematician at that time, and therefore Ptolemy invited him to Alexandria and develop Mathematics Institute. There is some correspondence, letters written from Ptolemy to Euclid and Euclid to Ptolemy. In one of the letters, Ptolemy says that can you simplify geometry and teach that to students? They are getting it, they are finding it very difficult. And the Euclid's answer I have written here. There is no royal road to geometry. You have to go through the hardship. You have to go through hard road, and only you can reach geometry. There is no royal road. This is third institute that I am showing you, the founded museum in Alexandria, and the greatest of all the contributions of the Greek came through Euclid's, and that is axiomatic method. See, now axiomatic method is used in so many branches, even in physics, even in developing certain computer systems or whatever. You write your assumptions. But this method of gathering knowledge, generating knowledge, was first developed by Euclid. So therefore, modern computer scientists have also acknowledged Euclid as the first person in artificial intelligence. See, the word artificial intelligence itself is last few years, 10, 20, 50 years at most. Euclid lived 2,500 years, 2,400 years back. But still, today people say that he was the first who thought algorithmically. Algorithmically. That is axiomatic, write some axioms and derive things one by one. So Euclid's work is a big advancement in the history of knowledge. See, some scientists, they work and then they progress the state of knowledge at that time. Some do more than that. But people like Newton, for example, you cannot say that he was a scientist. I mean, that is underestimation. Newton is a big step. I mean, all of us understood much more about the nature. So it was a big step. Newton was a big step. Gauss was a big step. Similarly, Euclid was a big step. It was a great step in the advancement of knowledge. And that step came up. See, in every point of time in the history, such great steps came up. And Euclid was, you can trace back such a big step in Euclid's work. Because he wrote very simple 5 axioms. And then everything came out of it. Great geometry came out of it. The work Elements, very influential in the history of mathematics. I have talked about this. Elements, 13 volumes of Elements. And these books were best sold books after Bible in Europe after Renaissance. After Renaissance, the quest for knowledge in Europe had explosion. Therefore, it is called Renaissance period. But then people thought that what is knowledge? Where is knowledge? Where can I find it? So everyone thought that it is hidden in geometry. And if you want to read it, read Elements. Okay. The 13-volume work contains 465 theorems on geometry, number theory and algebra. So these 3 topics are mainly covered. See, one can take up a mission in the life. See, I urge all of you. It's very easy because everything is in that book. You don't have to go outside that book. Even undefined terms are written by Euclid. And remember, this speciality of these books is that there is no preface, no foreword, no instruction for readers, no instruction for teachers, nothing. He gets into the business. That means, first of all, he will write undefined terms. Then he will write, so lines, points, whatever you want to say, undefined term. Everything written crystal clear. Then he will write axioms. And then he will derive theorems. So even a layman, so suppose if you think yourself as a layman, and if you want to pursue mathematics, and in a very beautiful way, start reading Elements. The printed versions are available. And everything is right there. So there are 465 theorems. You can complete in say 2-3 years, even if you go very slow. You want to do that? Yes or no? No answer. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Interesting.
Okay. Not easy, but it's okay. This is famous quote of Russell, which I showed you, I think, but I want to show it again because I like it. At the age of 11, I began Euclid. Russell was a great mathematician, philosopher in British person. I began Euclid. This was one of the great events of life, as dazzling as first love. Very thrilling, it means. It is a thrilling experience to read Euclid. So even if you decide to read, you will get such thrilling experience. You will remember your early days, youthful days, thrilling experience. I had not imagined that there was anything so delicious in this world. This is Russell. And now I will show a very different kind of quote by Abraham Lincoln, who was again President of America, very famous person, but very scholar. Now this is style of writing of Abraham. He studied means he is talking about himself. He studied and nearly mastered 6 books of Euclid. Remember, Abraham Lincoln mastered 6 books of Euclid. Since he was a member of Congress, that means otherwise he would have read all of them, 13. But he was a member of the Congress, so he could read only 6. He began a course of rigid mental discipline with the intent to improve his faculties, especially his powers of logic and language. Hence, his fondness for Euclid, which he carried with him on the circuit till he could demonstrate with ease all the proposition of 6 books. Abraham Lincoln could demonstrate proofs of all the statements in volume 6. Up to that, he has mastered. Often studying far into the night. In the night, he used to see, because throughout the day he is busy, with a candle near his pillow, while his fellow lawyers, he was a lawyer also, half a dozen in a room filled with air with interminable snoring. This is Abraham Lincoln, such a great scholar. In his free time, what he will do? He will read Euclid's Elements. Great. Now I will skip this Euclid's axiom and all that I have shown you already. I will skip all this and go to Diphontus and stop. Diphontus lived in Alexandria. Purposefully, I have selected one name which is not very famous but a great name, and after CE, after Christian, that is, all of them, Plato, Thales, Pythagoras, Euclid, were before. And you must have heard, some of you, Diophantine equation, which comes from Diphontus. Carried out great work in number theory in his famous book Arithmetic. Again, a voluminous work, Arithmetic. Bombelli, that is Renaissance period mathematics, 16th century mathematician, revived his work in arithmetic in Renaissance period. Bachet, again a 16th, 17th century mathematics, published an edition of arithmetic and advocated its importance. He told that solve this equation. So what Diophantus gave problems as solving algebraic equations and solving its solutions in set of positive integers. And this Bachet's publication of new edition of arithmetic motivated Fermat. And that's how Fermat's theorem came up. Fermat took up the challenge of working on the book and made significant advances. He solved so many Diophantine equations. See, Fermat was also a lawyer, remember, he was not a mathematician by profession. People wonder, such a great work, but they used to devote time for that. This is Fermat's last theorem, a very famous statement which remained unsolved. The equation has no solution in the set of positive integers if n is bigger or equal to 3. This remained unsolved after Fermat till 1993, very recent. And still living mathematician, great mathematician, Andrew Wiles solved this, ultimately after more than 300 years. Something not discussed here, something that I could not talk for the want of time, I could not give time. Socrates, I did not talk. Archimedes, I did not talk. Aristotle, I could not give time. Apollonius, I could not give time. Heron, I could not give time. All these theorems, perhaps some of you remember, Apollonius theorem, about the squares of the sides of a triangle in terms of square of the medians. Heron's theorem is about the area of a triangle in terms of its sides and semi-perimeter. Eratosthenes is known as first, primality testing algorithm, which is not efficient, but an algorithm for testing primality. There are some references. E.T. Bell, Sir Thomas Heath, very nice book, History of Greek Mathematics. Elie Moyer's book on Pythagorean theorem, I saw very recently only. I could read much of it, but not fully because I got the book also very late, but nice book. John Stilwell is a known book. I told you that I wrote an article on Euclid. And Paul Strathern, it's a very, very rare book, Pythagoras and his theorem, a big idea series. But fortunately, I have got a copy of this book. Thank you very much. Thank you.